What's up, friends? I've been starting seeds like this for nearly 6 years, and I want to show you exactly how you can do the same thing. But first off, I want to say if you're watching this video, I am so glad you're here. I find great joy in educating and inspiring you to succeed in your garden and on your homestead. Let's jump into it. So there's nothing more frustrating than when you're trying to start seeds and you get poor germination, the plants don't grow well, and you just feel like it's a little bit of a failure. The biggest key and most important part of starting your seeds is having a really good seed starting mixture. Now, this is one that we have purchased. It's from Morgan Composting. We did ship it in, but you don't have to do that. You just need a really good, high quality seed starting mix. And I'm going to link a video up above and down in the description of how you can mix your own seed starting mix using 2 ingredients, cocoa coir and worm castings. But for the sake of this video, I am going to be using this seed starting mix, but I've used cocoa coir and worm casting mix in the past, and it works very, very well because it's rich in nutrients from those worm castings. So in order for that plant to get a really good jump start before you transplant it out into the field or into your garden, you're going to need that great seed starting mix. And so the next thing you're going to need is obviously some type of trays or containers to start those seeds in. Now, I really prefer a 50 cell tray. It's a 10 by 20 tray. That's what they refer it to as, because that's just the standard shape of a plastic tray. So this is a 50 cell tray. This is going to be for your big crops like tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, squash, stuff like that. And then the other one is the 72 cell tray. Sorry for the squeaking in the background. That's my dog squeezing her ball. The 72 cell tray, to me, works really, really good for most everything. And that's actually what we're going to be planting in today. I don't really think you need much smaller. 72 and 50 cell work great. You can get cheap plastic trays, or you can get really high quality trays. These are from Neversink Farm Tools. I'll link this down in the description as well. And these will literally last you a lifetime. I mean, they're tough as nails. But again, if you're on a budget, you can get the really cheap, flimsy trays, and those will work fine as well. But I do prefer these. So all we're going to do is come along with the tray, and I've got all of our seed mix here in our grow room in just this plastic tote, and it works really good to give us enough soil mix to be able to get going. So all I'm going to do is come along here, and we are going to get this tray filled up with the seed mix. Now, one thing I do like to do is come along with my fingers and press down into the holes. That way I make sure there's not air gaps at the bottom. And this really helps to make sure each cell is really filled up with soil. And so we're going to come along and do that with our fingers. And then we're going to fill each hole up some more. Now after that, we just want to scrape that top off real good around the edges. And because these trays are air pruning, they actually have little holes in between each cell that we're not planting a seed. And so I'm just going to come along with my finger and press each one of those out, because we don't really need the soil there. So it's just kind of a waste. Now after you've done that, you're going to put it in your tray. I do prefer these trays with no holes in the bottom. And that way your tray of plants can sit in there, and you'll end up using this tray because you're going to end up bottom watering these seedlings. A lot of people think you just continually spray the top. You can, but I actually prefer, especially in an indoor setting, which is most attainable for most homesteaders and gardeners, is to use these bottom trays to stick your big tray into. So now that we've got that tray filled up, we want to kind of create an indentation for the seedling. So I'll just kind of come along with my finger and just kind of press down and make a little indentation into each cell. Now today we're planting lettuce in this tray, but this will apply to pretty much any seed that you're planting. I think a lot of times people kind of overcomplicate like how deep to plant the seed. The reality is we just made the indentions, and we're just going to drop that seed into each cell. Now, one thing to also mention, when you're planting those seeds into each cell, you may not want to plant 50 tomato plants. Like, that's a lot of tomato plants. Maybe you only want to do 10 tomato plants. and then 10 cucumbers, and then 10 squash, and then 10 watermelon, or however you want to lay it out. That's okay. And the great part is even if you're only transplanting, let's say cucumber at a certain time, and then you're going to wait a little bit for the watermelon, that's okay. Just transplant out what you need, and then put the tray of the remaining seedlings that you're waiting to transplant back under the grow lights. And so you can plant this with a diversity of seeds, I guess is my point. Now that we've done that, we're going to come along with the spray bottle. I'll put a link to this below. I like this because it's not a pump bottle. This is actually rechargeable, so it's got a battery, and all you have to do is press the button, and it sprays. And so we're going to come along and get those seeds nice and wet wherever we just planted them. Now, the seed starting mix is already moist, and to kind of give you a little bit of context of how wet and moist you want it, I like to be able to come along and squeeze it, and some water drips out like that. You don't want it absolutely sopping wet, but you do want a decent amount of moisture. So now that we've got the tops of those sprayed with our handy dandy spray bottle, we're going to come along with what's called vermiculite. And vermiculite, all it is a material that is just going to help hold in moisture where you planted your seed. So we're going to come along and sprinkle that on top. We don't want to just bury the seed. We just want enough to where the seed's covered. A lot of times people plant seeds too deep, and then the seed doesn't come up. And I will put a link down below to everything that I'm talking to you all about right now, including that vermiculite. Now we're going to come along and we're going to spray the tops of these again. We want to get it nice and moist. Again, we're not trying to just soak them, but we do want some good moisture for those seeds to germinate. If everything is just absolutely sopping wet, you can rot your seed. So the goal is not for this to just be absolutely saturated. We just want to hold in enough moisture for that seedling to germinate. And all germinate means is that seed is just sprouting. It's beginning the process of growing. So now that we've got that tray planted, we want to put them underneath the grow lights. Now, this is just a rollable rack, and I've got the grow lights, I would say probably 3 to 4 inches just above where the canopy of the plants are going to be. These are some established plants that are growing. And I do have these grow lights on a timer for about 12 hours per day. I'll put a link down below to a timer that you can set up, as well as the rack and grow lights. These are pretty cheap off of Amazon. They do the job. The reason we want to go ahead and get these trays underneath the grow lights is so when that seedling emerges, that it can immediately start capturing some of that artificial sunlight from the grow lights. These are from last week, and those have all emerged. Now, you can set up this rack anywhere in your house. Ideally, if it's in your house, it's already climate controlled, and that's going to help you a lot. We have an insulated grow room here that we have set up in our garage, so we do have a little space heater as well as a window AC unit to kind of keep it climate controlled, because the temperature is going to be key for germination. So if it's in your house and it's around 70 degrees, most all seedlings for your garden are going to germinate at that temperature. So now that you've got that set up, you're going to want to come along every day and use your spray bottle to mist the tray, because you want to keep this tray moist. You don't want anything to dry out. A lot of times people will try to start seeds in their windowsill and stuff, and plants just tend to get leggy because they're reaching for that sun, and leggy seedlings aren't going to perform well out in your garden. And so now that we've got that under there, we're just going to let it sit. We're going to come along and spray it every day to make sure it maintains moisture, and those seedlings are going to begin to emerge over the course of a week or so, depending upon the seed that you planted. Now, when it comes to this grow room or wherever you set it up, it does help to have a little bit of air circulation, so you can set up a fan or something of that nature in your grow room. I've got just a little box fan here, and that helps kind of just circulate air around, make sure you're not getting mold growth, and that will really help you a lot to have successful starts. Now, eventually, over the course of anywhere from 3, 4, or even 8 weeks, your seedlings are going to get really established, as you can see here. And at this phase, those plants are going to be ready to be transplanted out into the field. And so what you don't want to do is just take them straight from your grow room or wherever you're growing them and transplant them straight out, because you need to acclimate these plants or harden them off. That's the term that people use, hardening off your plants. You want to harden off these plants and get them prepared and acclimated to be planted out in the field, where they'll spend the rest of their life until you eat them. So the way that you want to do that is by slowly exposing these transplants to outdoor temperatures. So Once they get established and you're getting them ready to transplant, you're going to take this outside and put them on a table, and you're going to let them get a few hours of sunlight, a few hours of wind. It's going to stress the plants a little bit, but that's good. Just a little bit of stress is key. So on that first day, you're going to put this outside for 3 hours, bring it back in. The next day, do 6 hours, bring it back in. The next day, do all day, bring it back in. And then that final day, you're going to place them out for good and let them stay outside for the day and overnight. At that point, these plants will be ready for transplant out into the field. Now, depending upon the tray that you're going to be using, I really like these wind strip trays because when I'm ready to transplant that seedling, it actually has a hole in the bottom. So I can just press that seedling, that transplant out, and then I can just plant it into the field. The really cheap plastic flimsy trays don't have a hole, so you kind of have to pull on your seedling, which stresses it a little bit more from the top. Now, when you're hardening off these plants and acclimating them, make sure that you don't let them dry out. You want to make sure and come along and bottom water them. And when we bottom water, all we do is we just take, 1 to 2 cups of water. I've got a little tank here in my grow room where I can get water from. And we're going to come along here and just bottom water the plants. And this is a really good context for indoors because you're not trying to spray all your plants and stuff and making a mess. So once these new seedlings have emerged that we just planted, and you begin to see them looking like this, you're going to transition to bottom watering. So you'll no longer water from the top. You'll bottom water like I just showed you. And you're going to do that every, I would say, couple of days, depending upon how warm or cold your grow room is. But the key is you don't want to oversaturate your plants. I want a decent amount of moisture, but I don't want the plants just sitting in water in the bottom watering system. And so if you come along and you've bottom watered and 2 hours later you still got a bunch of water sitting in the bottom of the tray, you're giving them too much water. Again, 1 to 2 cups every couple of days should be sufficient. And then again, once your plants are established, you can prepare them, acclimate them, harden them off to be transplanted out into the field. So you got your air circulation, you got your grow rack, you got your grow lights, and just with one rack, you can literally do 16 flats of trays of seedlings. And that's a lot. One of these racks with 4 sets of grow lights on each should be ample space for your backyard garden and homestead. This is a really affordable way, y'all, to start seedlings. I've got all the links down in the description for the stuff I'm talking about. If you found this video helpful, hit that like and subscribe button. We'll see you in the next one.